Our panel here is interesting because they represent much more professional efforts. Wadhwani Foundation and Vidyalaya have been able to build up pretty decent-sized staffs in the United States, chapters in a lot of cities, programs in India that are very diverse, and they've really become among the larger, more engaged organizations in terms of outreach, fundraising, all of that stuff. So I think the value of this panel is really around the two organizations. So we'll start with giving each of them a chance to talk about their work, but what I really want to discuss after that is a little bit more about how they run NGOs that have an India focus, but also have significant staff, volunteers, operations in the United States, because I think that's what many of the people in the room strive to with their organizations is a larger size and larger impact. So with that, Ajay, why don't I turn it to you first, talk a little bit about Wadhwani Foundation.
So first of all, I want to thank Asif and for inviting me. Really appreciate that. We started 10 years ago with that mission, and today we have expanded into Pakistan, Indonesia, and Malaysia as well. And our goal is to sort of go to the emerging economies in Africa and South America as well. Going back to India, we drove economic acceleration in India through leveraging India's human potential. So as you all know, India has been adding 1 million people a month to the workforce. That happened, last 10 years, is going to happen for the next couple of decades as well. So given that human potential, the first thing we looked at is all of these people would need jobs. So job creation became a primary theme for the foundation. While India is sort of getting young, with all this youth coming into the workforce, most of the major economies of the world were also getting old. US is getting old, most of Europe is getting old, China also is getting old. So we felt that there was an opportunity here if we could upskill our population at scale. And with globalization, there was an opportunity to then use the skill population for around the globe. So those are the two primary thrust areas. We today have about 5 initiatives to target job creation, to target skill development. And the fact that we are trying to do it at a national level, we know it won't happen without changes in policies. So we have a policy initiative as well. On the side, we have another initiative in the US. Actually, there are 2 initiatives in the US. One is we have a chair, Rick is here, who's heading the chair at CSIS that drives Indo-US partnerships, primarily focused on economic acceleration, although we have a broader agenda with that. And then the other initiative in the US is what we call Race to a Job. This is targeting American youth that do not go to college. 3 years ago, when we looked at the data, unemployment in US was 8%, youth unemployment was 16%, and the youth between 16 and 25 was 24%. So today, US high schools sort of had a mad obsession to send everybody to a 4-year college, and not many go to a 4-year college. A large percentage, in fact, don't go to a 4-year college, and as you know, 46% go to community colleges. So we wanted to have a thrust and focus around trade-based vocational education on the US side. So to kind of reach that kind of scale, both in India and US, we need to leverage networks, and most of us have a Silicon Valley background, so we leverage technology to reach scale. So let me give you just a flavor of the kinds of things we do. So our oldest initiative was around job creation to create entrepreneurs. Again, if you look at India, 1 million people a month getting added to the workforce, all of them will need jobs. Very few were engaged in entrepreneurship. And we were relying on the Tatas and the Birlas to really create jobs. So we targeted college students. The idea was to educate and inspire college students to look at entrepreneurship as an alternative. If I fast forward to where we are today, we work with 500 institutes. We have trained 3,000 faculty around the country to teach entrepreneurship courses. We equip them with all the things they need to teach entrepreneurship. So on an average today, 500,000 students every year are inspired and educated towards entrepreneurship courses. So we handhold them through the next stage, including doing things like starting campus companies. And the way we measure our success in this program is look on graduation, how many of our students start companies, what sort of jobs they are creating, what's the average revenue, so that we get a sense of the quality of the jobs. This will give you a flavor of what we do. And similarly, we are doing something similar on the skill development side. So that's it. Thank you.
I think, Ajay, you're being modest about the projects of the Wadhwani Foundation. I think the success of the National Entrepreneurship Network to have 500 universities with entrepreneurship clubs is quite impressive, and it speaks to what we spoke about in the earlier panel I was on, which is in the education space, there is a real opportunity to influence change from the United States working in India, and I think this is just another example of that. Ajay, I want to ask you a similar question about programs in India. Now, you obviously don't have to do as much fundraising in the United States, but you manage a lot of partnerships in India. How do you manage quality? How do you assess the partners that you have? 500 institutions, a lot of other programs. So how do you keep tabs on quality control? And I ask that from two perspectives. One, as an organization, just having good practices, but also one of the biggest concerns NRIs have is where their money is going, fairly or unfairly. They always have questions about where the money is being spent. And so how do you deal with those sort of broader issues of legitimacy, reputation, evaluation?
We ourselves run our own organization. It's fairly outcomes driven. So we have an outcomes metrics for each of our initiatives. And basically, when we are signing up with partners, we are projecting those outcomes onto the partners as well. Let me explain a little bit about our model. So typically, we come up with our own niche, high-impact initiatives and make the initial investment. So 100% of the investment is ours to demonstrate that this is doable. The fact that we are trying to achieve national scale, the only way to achieve that kind of scale is to leverage government resources or market forces. So those are the two primary areas. Our mantra is show feasibility and viability and to prove to ourselves that this is going to work, but then get a 10x investment from the government. So recently on our skilling initiative, we started that 3 years ago, which is a combination of vocational education to create a parallel community college system in India, as well as take that vocational education into high schools. And we've been able to leverage about 1,000 crores of government money to fund vocational education. First is around 400 new community colleges, but more importantly, around somewhere close to about 600 high schools that are putting these programs in place. So that's one partnership, is at the government level. The second partnership is around we can't reach scale without building networks. So this is the Institute for Entrepreneurship that I talked about. So there we had a very simple metrics. We know that it takes 5 years from when we sign an institute to when they start producing entrepreneurs at the other end. So the first 5 years, we are essentially managing input parameters, how many courses they are conducting, how many students are taking it, what's the qualitative assessment from the students. But very quickly, we move on to outcomes. How many companies are getting created, how many jobs are getting created by these companies, and what revenue they're generating. So the focus on outcomes, I think, is what makes it easier.
So that leads into my next question, which I'll just stay with you for that, is what is the time frame for achieving impact? So these things take a long time. So you mentioned 5 years plus, but if somebody was to do a case study on you and say, this is a good example of how long it takes to impact change in India, what's the answer you'd give?
So impact and scale in most of these is a 10, 15-year journey. But impact at the individuals, but the impact at the at the individual institute level can be a very short term. So for instance, I talked about on the entrepreneurship, it's a 5-year impact. On the schools, actually the impact is a 1 year. When they graduate, we measure, are these students that are taking our vocational courses getting jobs? If they are getting jobs, are they getting jobs with a higher salary compared to a student graduating from another school that we aren't involved in? But these experiments to scale is a 10, 15-year journey in India.
I'd like to ask, how do you differentiate the role of the United States operations and India operations and give flexibility to the India team to do what they do and do here? So as a lot of the NGOs people are involved with here grow, that becomes a natural tension point, is who's doing what and whose ownership and responsibility. So maybe you could each talk about how you separate what you do in Silicon Valley or in US with India.
So first of all, we look to US for the money, and the money comes from a single guy. So that's the only connection we have. The initiatives that we have in the US, we have a US team. We are leveraging the India team because it's a technology solution for US as well. We are leveraging the India team to develop the US solution, adopting the Silicon Valley software model of outsourcing to India. But beyond that, there is really no connection.
But so the India management for all these projects is fully empowered to run all the initiatives there.
Right.
I have a question for Ajay. How do you manage capital for the entrepreneurs, the ones that start out of schools and colleges?
I think the last 3 years, we have shifted our focus from creating entrepreneurs to supporting entrepreneurs. And one of the key things that an entrepreneur requires is capital. So again, if we talk about the numbers, we ourselves are generating 1,500 companies a year. Over the last 10 years, the ecosystem in India has dramatically changed, where today an IITian, their first preference is to start a company rather than come to the US. So our focus has shifted in building an ecosystem. A lot of these young startups, what they need is the first $50,000 to get their companies going. And you can only borrow so much from friend and family. So a year ago, we initiated a program where we have tons of HNIs in the country, high net worth individuals. For them, $50,000 is play money. So we put together a three-day course with a professor from Oxford to train HNIs to become angel investors. So that's step one. And then we connect them to our entrepreneurs and the community entrepreneurs, those that came outside of our system. So that's the ecosystem sort of we have building. Then there are some government programs that are ineffective. You know, the SIDBI today has programs, and we are working on the policies so that we can free up those dollars as well, or rupees.